I used to believe love was the one thing money couldn't touch. That no matter how cruel the world became, a promise made under God was still sacred, still safe. But I was wrong. Because the devil doesn't always come with horns. Sometimes he walks in wearing your wife's perfume. I built everything with my hands, brick by brick, hour by hour, thinking loyalty could hold a family together. But when that lottery ticket hit, when 7 numbers changed our lives, it didn't just expose what we had, it exposed who we were. They said I was lucky. But luck is just another word for what people call jealousy when they can't control you. In this world, it's not betrayal that breaks a man, it's realizing who helped plan it. Beat, silence, a breath. Now I don't build homes for people anymore. I build them for redemption. Because when you've lost everything, your name, your pride, your heart, you learn that sometimes the only way to rebuild is to let it all fall first. If you've ever given your all and got betrayed in return, this story is for you. Subscribe now for The Fall of the Freds, a powerful Black American family drama about love, greed, and redemption. Watch the story unfold. Feel every wound. Witness the rise of the man they tried to destroy. The Florida sun rose slow and golden, spilling over the half-finished steel frames of an Orlando construction site. Dust shimmered like fine mist as Henry Fred stood at the edge of the lot, his hands on his hips, watching his crew lay the foundation for a new city library. He looked proud. Not loud, not boastful, but quietly proud, the way men who've worked for everything tend to be. He wore his usual work shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, sweat darkening the fabric near his chest. His voice, calm and deep, carried easily over the hum of machines. "Level that beam before the pour," he said, nodding to a younger worker. "Take your time. You rush a foundation, the whole house will remind you later." The men respected Henry, not because of his title but because he was one of them. He knew how to make a hand bleed, how to stand 12 hours in the sun and still say good morning with a grin. By 10 a.m. his phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "Brunch at 11 with the family. Don't forget we're supposed to stop by later." Henry smiled. She never said, "my family," just the family. It was a small thing, but lately he noticed the distance hidden in the words. At home, Vanessa Fred stood in their kitchen, the air scented with cinnamon, coffee, and something faintly floral. She moved gracefully, everything deliberate. Her reflection glided across the black marble counter as she plated breakfast for 2, though she already knew Henry wouldn't make it back before she left. She checked her phone again, unread messages from Marcus, her brother. "Marcus, don't be late. Dad's already on one of his rants about Henry. Marcus, bring that smile. Keeps him calm." Vanessa's jaw tightened. She replied with a single emoji, a polite smile, then slipped her phone into her purse. For a moment, she stood by the kitchen window, watching sunlight spill through the garden Henry had planted himself. A small white bird hopped along the fence. It reminded her of simpler times, days when Henry would wake early, fix her coffee, and talk about dreams. But lately dreams felt like debts, things she owed herself for staying. At the Thompson residence, brunch wasn't a meal, it was a performance. The table gleamed with crystal glasses and silver cutlery. Clarence Thompson sat at the head, his posture sharp as his tone. Evelyn poured orange juice but kept her eyes on her daughter. "Vanessa," Clarence began, "how's Henry's little construction thing going?" Vanessa offered a small, polite smile. "It's not little, Daddy. They just got a new contract with the city." Marcus smirked. "So, building sidewalks and street signs now? That's big money, huh?" Evelyn's soft laugh was almost musical. "Marcus, be nice." But she didn't look sorry. Clarence cleared his throat, folding his napkin with precision. "Vanessa, we raised you to aim higher. A man like Henry, honest, yes, but he'll never be more than what he is. There's no shame in wanting stability, but you can't build a future on sentiment." Vanessa stared at her plate. "We're fine," she said softly. "We're happy." Marcus leaned forward, voice low. "You look fine. But happy? I don't see it." The words hung heavy. Vanessa excused herself a few minutes later, saying she had errands. But as she walked to her car, her heart carried that familiar ache, the kind that comes from defending someone who doesn't even know he's being judged. That evening, the porch lights glowed warm against the fading blue of dusk. Henry sat with his boots off, a glass of wine in hand, the soft chirp of crickets filling the silence. Vanessa joined him, her hair down, her eyes distant. He looked at her, really looked. "You ever think," he said quietly, "that maybe we've done okay for ourselves?" She smiled faintly. "What do you mean?" He gestured toward the house. "This. I didn't come from much, Nessa. but we've built something solid. Like a good foundation. Her smile faltered. You always say that. Foundation. Well, it's true, he chuckled. Everything worth keeping starts there. You don't rush it. You don't cheat it. You take your time. She nodded, eyes on her wine glass. Maybe some foundations don't hold. No matter how strong they start. Henry turned to her. You saying ours won't? She hesitated, too long. Then she smiled again too quickly. No, baby. I'm just tired. That's all. But in her voice, something had shifted. A distance too small to measure, too real to ignore. Henry leaned back, watching the last streaks of sunlight fade beyond the trees. He didn't notice the way she checked her phone under the table. Another message from Marcus, unread but glowing. For now, he still believed in them. For now, he still believed that love, like a house, could outlast the cracks. But even the strongest walls crumble when the ground beneath starts to move. Have you ever been so sure someone loved you, until silence told you the truth? Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you've ever built a life from scratch only to feel it slipping, tell us your story below. Because this isn't just Henry's story, it's ours. The story of trust, work, and what happens when the person beside you starts to drift away. The air was thick that morning, that kind of humid Florida heat that clung to the skin like memory. The kind that made even the simplest errand feel like a chore. Vanessa Fred stood at the checkout line of a small grocery store on Edgewater Drive, her mind elsewhere. Her cart was half full, milk, eggs, oranges, a bouquet of lilies she didn't remember picking up. Ahead of her, a mother scolded her child for touching the candy rack. The cashier's smile was weary. It was an ordinary day, painfully ordinary, until Vanessa's eyes fell on a bright red and yellow sign by the register. Florida jackpot, $10 million. Winning numbers drawn tonight. She stared for a moment, then laughed quietly. 10 million, she murmured, shaking her head. If only. The cashier chuckled. You never know, ma'am. Somebody's gotta win. Vanessa hesitated, then reached for her purse. All right, give me one ticket. She didn't even check the number. She just folded it neatly, tucked it into her wallet, and went home. That evening, the house smelled of garlic and baked chicken. Henry was at the dining table working through a stack of blueprints. His reading glasses hung low on his nose, and the faint hum of the ceiling fan filled the silence. Vanessa came in humming softly, groceries in hand. I picked up dinner, she said, setting the bags down. Henry looked up and smiled. You didn't have to, baby. I was just about to order something. I know, she said, a teasing smile flickering across her face. But I was in the mood to cook. As she unpacked, Henry noticed the small strip of paper on the counter. What's that? Oh, that, she said casually. Just a lottery ticket. He laughed. A lottery ticket? You. She shrugged, pouring wine into 2 glasses. It was $1. Who knows? Maybe I'll get lucky. Henry grinned, shaking his head. I thought you didn't believe in luck. I don't, she replied, handing him a glass. But maybe luck believes in me. They laughed, a sound that had been rare lately. For a moment, the air between them felt light again like it used to be. Later that night, the two of them sat on the couch, the television flickering in the dim room. The local news anchor was announcing the winning numbers. Vanessa wasn't even paying attention. She had her head on Henry's shoulder, half asleep. All right, let's see, Henry muttered, reading the numbers aloud. 23, 36, and 42. He glanced at the ticket, squinting. Then again. And again. His voice caught. Vanessa. She stirred. Vanessa, he said again, louder this time, his tone trembling. You need to look at this. She frowned, sitting up. What's wrong? Henry's hands were shaking as he passed her the ticket. I think we just won. Vanessa laughed, until she saw his face. Then she took the ticket, looked down at it, and froze. 1 number. 2, 3. All the way to 6. Every single number matched. Her breath caught. Oh my God, she whispered. Henry, we won, he said, almost in disbelief. We won, baby. The silence that followed lasted only a second, and then came the sound of pure, unfiltered joy. Vanessa screamed. Henry laughed until his eyes filled with tears. They jumped, hugged, spun around the room like 2 kids who'd just been told the world was theirs. Henry kissed her forehead again and again. Can you believe this? 7 million after taxes, maybe more. We can pay off everything. The house, the car. Vanessa's laughter was breathless. We could travel. Start fresh. Go to Italy like we said we would. Or start that business I've been talking about, Henry said. Fred and Sons, even if we don't have sons. She smiled, wrapping her arms around him. Fred works just fine. For the first time in months, their love didn't feel tired or strained. It felt real again, alive. They stayed up late that night, lying on the porch swing, talking about dreams that had once felt too far to touch. The stars above them glowed softly, the air warm and heavy with the scent of the lilies she'd bought earlier. Henry, Vanessa whispered, her head on his chest. Maybe this is a sign. He stroked her hair. A sign of what? That everything's turning around. For us. He smiled in the dark. I'll take that sign. But as the night deepened, the laughter faded into quiet breathing. Vanessa's eyes remained open long after Henry had fallen asleep. She stared at the lottery ticket resting on the table beside them. It looked so small, a piece of paper, a miracle, a beginning. And in the silence, something she couldn't name stirred inside her. It wasn't greed, not yet. It was possibility. And possibility, when whispered to by the wrong voices, can become something dangerous. The house was no longer quiet. It began with the phone, the endless ringing, the late-night calls, the whispers that fell silent when Henry walked into the room. Vanessa was always handling something, always stepping away. At first, Henry didn't think much of it. After all, they had just become millionaires. People were bound to call, friends, reporters, distant relatives. But within days, the warmth that had returned between them after the lottery win began to cool again. One humid morning, Henry came into the kitchen to find Vanessa sitting at the counter, her laptop open and her voice low. Yes, I understand, she said into the phone. Just transfer it into the family account for now. Daddy will know what to do. She noticed Henry standing in the doorway and quickly smiled. Hey baby. You're up early. Who's that? He asked casually, pouring himself coffee. Oh, just Dad, she said too quickly. He's worried about the tax stuff. You know how he gets. Henry nodded slowly. He doesn't have to worry about us. We got Jamal for that. I know, she said, closing her laptop. But Daddy's just trying to help. Henry forced a smile. Right. Help. He didn't push it, not yet. By the end of that week, the Thompsons had reappeared in full force. Clarence called twice a day, each time with the same tone of controlled authority. Vanessa, sweetheart, listen to me, you can't just leave that ticket lying around. Bring it here. My financial team can keep it safe until everything clears. This is serious money. You need professionals. Evelyn was softer but more cutting. Darling, we just want what's best for you. Henry's not used to this kind of responsibility. You don't want to see him overwhelmed. Even Marcus found his way into her daily life. He showed up unannounced with coffee, talking fast, smiling too much. V, he said one morning, lounging on her couch, this kind of money changes everything. You could finally do something for you. You don't need to be tied down to anyone right now. Marcus, she sighed, you're talking about my husband. He shrugged. I'm talking about your future. Don't mix the two up. Lillian came next, her voice calm and silky as always. You're smart, Vanessa. Always have been. You don't need anyone to guide you, not even your father. You just need to be careful who you let near your fortune. Vanessa listened to all of them, too much, too often. Their words wove themselves into her thoughts like vines, growing slowly around the trust she once had in Henry. Henry noticed the change before he could name it. It was in the way she avoided his eyes when he came home. The way her laughter at dinner sounded rehearsed. The way she started locking her phone and changing passwords to their shared accounts. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the table. The name flashing across the screen made Henry pause. Marcus Thompson. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. He already knew what it meant. That weekend, Vanessa mentioned she'd be spending a few days at her parents' house, to discuss the financial details. Henry tried to sound understanding. Do you need me to come? She hesitated. No, baby. They just want to handle some things first. Handle what? Trust. Investments. It's complicated. He frowned. You don't trust me with it? She smiled faintly. It's not about trust, Henry. It's just business. Business, he repeated. The word tasted bitter. When she left, the house felt too quiet. Henry stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty coffee cup she'd left behind. He tried to distract himself with work, but the silence kept pressing on his chest. The sound of her voice replayed in his head, soft, distant, slipping away. He thought of their porch conversations, of her laughter the night they won. It felt like years ago already. Henry wasn't a man who doubted easily. He'd built his life on faith faith in hard work, in God and people. But something deep inside him whispered that faith alone wouldn't fix what was coming. By midweek, the storm was fully gathering. Vanessa had stopped answering calls after 8 p.m. Her messages were short. Busy. In a meeting. Can't talk now. Then one afternoon Henry received a call from Jamal Carter, his attorney friend. Henry, I just wanted to check in. Vanessa's father reached out to me today. Henry's grip tightened on the phone. Clarence did what? He wanted my opinion on how the winnings should be structured, without your involvement. Henry went silent. I told him I don't discuss a client's matters without their consent, Jamal continued. But Henry, you should know he's moving fast. Their family's planning something. I can feel it. Henry swallowed hard. Thanks, Jamal. I'll handle it. When he hung up, his reflection stared back from the dark window, tired eyes, the faint tremor of disbelief. He whispered to himself, handle it. But how do you handle betrayal when it's wearing your wedding ring? That night, when Vanessa returned, she smelled faintly of expensive perfume in someone else's world. She kissed Henry on the cheek like a stranger. Hey, baby. He nodded. Everything all right? Just a lot to think about. He looked at her for a long time. You trust me, don't you? She met his gaze, smiled faintly, but didn't answer. Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere beyond the city. The air felt heavy, alive with things unsaid. The storm hadn't broken yet. But it was close enough for Henry to taste it. And when it came, it wouldn't just wash things clean. It would drown everything that wasn't built to last. The silence didn't come all at once. It crept in gradually, a missed call here, an unanswered text there. Then came the nights when the house stayed dark long past midnight, and Henry would sit at the kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at the empty chair across from him. Vanessa said she needed clarity. Clarity, the word lingered like a fog. She told him she was staying at her mother's for a few days to get her thoughts straight. But a few days became a week and then another. Soon it was just Henry in that College Park home they'd built together, the laughter gone, the silence pressing against the walls. At work, Henry tried to hold it together. He'd walk the construction site in the morning sun, giving orders, checking measurements, but his mind was never there. His foreman Darius noticed first. Boss, you good? Henry forced a grin. Yeah, just tired. Tired don't make you drop your clipboard twice. Henry laughed softly, shaking his head. Guess I'm getting old. But when he looked up at the steel beams rising into the Florida sky, he saw none of it, just the reflection of a dinner table he wasn't invited to anymore. Each evening he tried something new. He sent flowers, her favorites, white lilies with soft pink edges. He left voicemails, gentle, careful. Hey V, just wanted to check on you. I miss your voice. Don't stay gone too long, okay? Some nights he didn't call at all. He'd just sit on the porch, listening to crickets, watching the light flicker across the empty driveway. He told himself it was temporary. That every marriage has storms. That love, their love, would be enough to bring her home. But clarity wasn't what Vanessa was seeking. She was being remade, piece by piece, word by word, by the voices in that Grand Thompson mansion. Clarence with his calm certainty. Evelyn with her polished guilt. Marcus with his smirking half-truths. At their dinner table, Vanessa sat straighter now, laughed more easily. She was surrounded by comfort. Crystal glasses, polished silver, the hum of expensive air conditioning. Her father spoke of investments and image. Her mother spoke of social perception. Marcus spoke of independence. And between the laughter and the subtle digs, Henry's name stopped being said altogether. On Thursday evening, Henry drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of Winter Park, his hands loose on the steering wheel. The air was thick with humidity and memory. He didn't mean to end up there, at the Thompson estate, but when he did, he pulled over across the street, headlights off. The house stood proud and glowing, its windows spilling golden light onto the manicured lawn. Through the wide dining room window he saw them, all of them. Vanessa sat at the center, a glass of wine in hand, laughter lighting her face. Clarence's hand rested proudly on her shoulder as he said something that made everyone at the table laugh. Evelyn dabbed her lips delicately with a napkin. Marcus leaned back, smirking, his eyes drifting toward the window for a second, almost as if he knew. Henry stayed still. He didn't move, didn't blink. From this distance it looked like a painting, one he wasn't supposed to be part of. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling something inside him break. Not loud, not violent, but quiet and deep, like wood cracking under weight. For a moment he thought about getting out. Walking up to that door. Asking her why. But the thought faded as quickly as it came. Instead he watched. Watched her raise her glass, watched her father's hand on her shoulder, watched her laugh at a joke he didn't hear. She looked happy. Happy in a way she hadn't been with him in months. Happy without him. He turned the ignition, the engine purring softly like it knew to keep quiet. He drove off without a word. Back home, the house greeted him like an empty cathedral. The lilies on the counter had begun to wilt, their fragrance turning sharp in the still air. He poured himself a drink, not to forget but to stay awake. To think. He sat in his recliner, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The television stayed off. His phone sat face down. He thought about her, about the promises, the porch conversations, the laughter that once made everything else disappear. He whispered into the dark, "How did we get here, V?" No answer came, just the steady ticking of the clock, each second echoing like a reminder that time only moves forward. The next morning Henry woke to sunlight filtering through the blinds. He showered, dressed, and stood in front of the mirror. For a moment he didn't recognize the man looking back at him. The sadness, the wear, the quiet resolve. He buttoned his shirt slowly, his reflection hardening with every motion. He might have lost her laughter for now. He might have lost her warmth. But he hadn't lost himself. And if this was silence before war, then Henry Fred was learning to stand in it, still, patient, unshaken. Because storms pass. But the man who builds foundations knows how to stand when others crumble. The morning it happened, Orlando was unusually quiet. No wind, no sound of kids riding bikes down the street, just the low hum of the ceiling fan above Henry's breakfast table. He was buttering toast when the knock came. 3 sharp raps. Not hesitant, official. When he opened the door, a woman in a dark blazer stood there, clutching a manila envelope. "Mr. Henry Fred?" "Yes." She handed it to him without emotion. "You've been served." Henry froze, the words barely registering as she walked away down the driveway. The sunlight felt harsh, almost cruel, spilling across the papers now trembling in his hand. He tore them open, eyes scanning the first line, and then the second. Each word cut deeper. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner, Vanessa Thompson Fred. He sank slowly into a chair, the toast growing cold beside him. When she came that evening she didn't knock. She still had a key. Vanessa stepped into the house like it belonged to someone else. Her perfume faint, her posture composed, her wedding ring noticeably absent. Henry looked up from the table. His voice was steady but his eyes were not. "So this is how you do it?" She sighed. "Henry, please. Don't make this harder." "Harder?" He laughed bitterly. "You served me divorce papers before breakfast." She crossed her arms. "I had to protect myself. The money." "The money?" he interrupted. "You mean our money, Vanessa. You bought that ticket with our grocery cash. Out of our joint account." Her tone sharpened. "It was my ticket. I picked the numbers. I made the purchase. Legally that makes it mine." He stared at her, disbelief flooding every line of his face. "You really believe that?" "I know that," she said. Leonard confirmed it. "And Daddy?" He slammed his hand on the table, the sound cracking through the room. "Don't say his name right now." Vanessa flinched, then lifted her chin. "You're not going to guilt me into this, Henry? You've been controlling for years, always needing to protect me, to handle everything. This is me taking back my life." Henry's voice broke. "I built this life with you, Vanessa. Every brick of it." She looked away, eyes glistening but guarded. "Then maybe I just want to see what I can build on my own." For a long time neither spoke. The sound of the ceiling fan filled the silence again, steady and merciless. Then she turned quietly and walked toward the door. "Don't follow me," she whispered. The door shut softly, and with it 10 years of shared laughter, struggle, and faith. Henry didn't remember much after that. He drove. No direction, no plan, just asphalt, sunlight, and the ache of something breaking that couldn't be put back together. By evening he was on the long stretch of I-95 heading north. The city lights faded behind him as the road opened into night. His father's old house in Jacksonville waited like an old wound, peeling paint, sagging porch, and memories that never stopped echoing. He parked, got out, and just stood there for a moment, staring at the home that had shaped him. A place where he'd learned work, dignity, silence. The porch creaked under his boots as he sat down on the old swing. The same one his father used to sit on during thunderstorms, watching the rain carve paths through the dirt road. Henry leaned forward, elbows on his knees. For the first time in decades he didn't hold it in. The tears came heavy, quiet, unstoppable. Not just for Vanessa, but for everything. For the years he gave, the patience he offered, the faith he carried. For the humiliation of being discarded like he'd been an extra in his own marriage. He whispered into the night, "I thought love meant building something that lasts." The wind didn't answer. Neither did God. Only the old porch groaned softly beneath him, as if it too remembered what it meant to hold something that was breaking. Hours passed. The moon hung low, silvering the yard where his father once planted gardenias. Henry reached into his pocket and pulled out his wedding band. He turned it over in his hand, the faint engraving inside still visible. "All that I am, I give to you." He stared at it for a long time before closing his fist. "Maybe," he said softly, "some things shouldn't be given so easily." He didn't throw it away. He didn't smash it. He just held it, like a truth he wasn't ready to let go of. The night grew colder, but the air felt cleaner. Somewhere in that silence, the storm inside him shifted. Not ending, not easing, but transforming. Something was changing in Henry Fred. He didn't know it yet, but this was the night the man who had loved without guard began to wake the man who would no longer be taken for granted. What would you do if the person you trusted most turned their love into a weapon? Tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Have you ever been blindsided by someone you thought would stand beside you forever? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes healing starts when someone else says, "That happened to me too." The next morning, Henry woke to sunlight creeping through the curtains of his father's old house. The kind of light that didn't ask questions, just existed. He hadn't slept much. His eyes were raw, his throat dry, but his spirit, though bruised, had found a thin line of focus. It was time to fight. Not with anger. Not with revenge. With truth. He called the only man he trusted for this kind of war, Jamal Carter. They'd met years ago on a construction project Jamal had invested in before going fully into law. Jamal was everything Henry admired in a man, sharp, articulate, calm under fire. By noon, Henry was back in Orlando, sitting in Jamal's small but efficient downtown office. Sunlight cut through the blinds, catching the edges of polished law books and framed photos. Jamal shaking hands with clients, Jamal coaching his son's basketball team, Jamal standing at a courthouse podium. He looked up from behind his desk as Henry entered. "You look like hell, brother." Henry forced a tired smile. "You're not wrong." "Sit," Jamal said, gesturing to the chair. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." For the next hour, Henry told him everything. The lottery ticket, the family meetings, the withdrawal, the divorce papers. Jamal listened, taking notes in tight, deliberate strokes. When Henry was done, he leaned back and exhaled. "So," Jamal said slowly, "you're telling me she bought the ticket while running errands, with funds from your joint account?" "That's right." "Still married?" "Yes." "And the prenup?" Henry reached into his worn briefcase and pulled it out, a neatly folded document, still smelling faintly of paper and hope. Signed March 2015. Jamal scanned it, nodding. Clause 12. All prizes or earnings acquired during the marriage shall be considered marital property unless otherwise specified. He looked up. "Henry, this is gold." Henry blinked. "So, what does that mean?" "It means they can twist and shout all they want, but the law's on your side. Florida Statute 61.075 is clear. Marital assets are anything acquired during the marriage. And that ticket? Bought with your joint money. Joint asset." Henry's jaw tightened. "They'll still fight." "Oh, they will," Jamal said, a faint grin curving his mouth. "But let them. They want to play rich? We'll play fair, and fair wins slow but strong." Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa was assembling her own army. Her attorney, Leonard Harris, was no stranger to spectacle. Slick, confident, and always one sentence away from arrogance, Leonard had made a name for himself representing wealthy families and politicians with messy secrets. He was also, as fate would have it, the former law partner of Anthony Pierce, Vanessa's ex-boyfriend from her early 20s. The connection wasn't lost on anyone. When Vanessa entered Leonard's office, she did so in silence. He stood to greet her, eyes flicking briefly to the diamond on her hand that she hadn't yet taken off. "Mrs. Fred," he said smoothly. "Or should I say Miss Thompson again soon?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," she replied coolly. He smiled. "You're here because you want to protect what's yours. I can do that." He glanced through the petition documents, nodding approvingly. "The ticket purchase is your strongest point. You made the buy. You chose the numbers. Intent is ownership." Vanessa nodded, though her confidence wavered for a moment. "Henry will fight back." "He can try," Leonard said. "But we'll be ready." That night, Marcus sat with her in her parents' garden, the glow of string lights softening his sharp features. "I told you I'd handle it," he said, handing her a folder. Inside was a document, proof of a recent loan from him to her, meant to help cover her legal fees. Vanessa hesitated. "Marcus, I can't take your money." "You're not taking it," he said quickly. "You're using it. There's a difference." "Daddy already said." "Daddy doesn't know everything," he cut in. "This is about you, V. You finally have a chance to stand on your own. Don't let him guilt you out of it." She looked at her brother, torn between gratitude and unease. "You think I'm doing the right thing?" Marcus leaned back, smirking faintly. "You're doing what every strong woman has to do at least once, choosing herself." He didn't tell her that part of the loan came from funds he'd siphoned quietly from their father's business accounts. To Marcus, family meant leverage, and Vanessa was now his best investment. Across town, Henry sat in Jamal's office again, staring at the evidence Jamal had printed. Bank statements, receipts, and the lottery ticket purchase logged on their shared debit card. Every line told a story of trust and betrayal. "You ready to go to war?" Jamal asked. Henry nodded. "I didn't start it, but I'm not running from it." Jamal smiled faintly. "Good. Because this isn't just about money anymore. It's about your name." Henry's voice was steady. "Then let's make sure it's remembered right." That night, back in his empty home, Henry stood by the window, the city lights reflecting in his tired eyes. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "They took my peace. But they won't take my dignity." He looked down at the table where Jamal's business card lay, black ink bold against white. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was armor. And for the first time since the silence began, Henry Fred felt something new stir inside him. Resolve. It started as a whisper. Then it became a headline. And soon it was everywhere. By Monday morning, Henry's quiet life was no longer his own. The local news led with it. Lottery love turns ugly. Orlando couple in $7 million divorce war. A smiling photo of Vanessa from a charity gala flashed on the screen beside a grainy picture of Henry in a hard hat at a construction site. The contrast was deliberate, polished wealth against working man. The caption underneath read, "He built homes. She built a future. Now they're tearing each other down." By noon, the phone at Henry's office wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, bloggers, curious friends, a producer from a morning talk show. "Mr. Fred, we'd love to hear your side. Henry, the people want to know if you feel betrayed." "Sir, did your wife win the ticket, or did you?" He said the same thing every time. No comment. When Darius stopped by his trailer at the site, he found Henry staring at the small TV on the wall, the headline scrolling across the bottom again and again. Darius sighed. "You okay, boss?" Henry didn't look away. "They make it sound like I'm some fool trying to take her money." "That's what sells," Darius said quietly. "But the people who matter, they know the truth." Henry nodded, eyes heavy but clear. Truth doesn't trend, D. Across town, in a mansion filled with flowers and polished silver, the Thompsons were celebrating their own version of the story. Clarence had hired a media consultant to manage optics. Evelyn rehearsed lines for interviews that hadn't even been requested yet. "Remember," she told Vanessa, "you are composed. You are measured. You are the woman who endured years of emotional neglect and simply chose peace." Vanessa frowned. "I never said that." "You don't have to," Evelyn replied smoothly. "You imply. Let the world fill in the blanks." That afternoon, Vanessa posted on her social media for the first time in months. "Some endings aren't failures, they're just the moment you stop carrying what was never meant for you." The comments came fast. "You deserve better, sis. Stay strong, queen. Don't let him take what's yours." Marcus watched from across the room, smirking as he scrolled. "You're trending already. Hashtag lottery love is up by 5,000 mentions." Vanessa exhaled, half proud, half nauseated. "This isn't who I am, Marcus." He leaned forward, voice low. "Then stop worrying about who you were. Worry about winning." Meanwhile, Evelyn hosted one of her infamous charity luncheons, the kind that smelled of perfume, pearls, and pretense. She smiled for photos, answered polite questions, and when someone inevitably brought up the situation, she placed a manicured hand over her heart. "Oh, it's been so painful for Vanessa," she said softly. "She's been through so much emotional distance these last few years. But she's strong. She'll come out of this with grace." Grace, the word rolled off her tongue like a practiced lie. Every sentence, every sigh was calculated. Every appearance a performance. Henry, on the other hand, had no performance left in him. He refused every interview, ignored every call from tabloids and went to work before sunrise. He checked foundation slabs, redrew blueprints, ate his lunch in silence. Some of his co-workers admired it. "Man's got pride," one said. Others weren't so sure. "Or guilt," another whispered. By the end of the week, his silence had earned him both respect and suspicion. On Friday evening, Jamal stopped by the construction site, a manila folder tucked under his arm. He leaned against Henry's truck, watching him wrap up for the day. "They're painting you as a gold digger," Jamal said. Henry gave a dry laugh. "That's a first. They've got PR teams pushing the narrative. Vanessa's post alone got 500,000 views." Henry wiped the sweat from his brow. And it's working. Public sympathy's on her side, at least for now. Henry looked out across the site, the hum of distant machinery filling the air. "Let them talk. The court isn't Instagram." Jamal smiled faintly. "That's the spirit. But still be ready. They'll try to provoke you. Don't give them the story they want." Henry nodded, his jaw set. "I already gave them enough of my story. They can make up the rest." That night, he drove home to his quiet house, the lilies long dead, the porch light flickering. He sat outside, listening to the faint hum of city life beyond his gate. He thought about the world's version of him, the man on TV, the man people argued about in comments, the man reduced to a rumor. And then he thought of the man he actually was, the one who still showed up to work, who still believed in decency, who still couldn't bring himself to hate the woman who'd broken him. For the first time in weeks, he whispered a prayer. Not for victory, but for strength. Because in a world that rewarded noise, Henry Fred's greatest weapon was his silence. By the end of August, the fight had gone from courtrooms to living rooms, from legal filings to public whispers. Everywhere Henry Fred went, there was an echo of his name. In barbershops, diners, Facebook groups. Everybody had an opinion. Everybody had heard something. And what they'd heard wasn't the truth. It started with a blog post. Anonymous, unverified, but perfectly timed. Sources close to Vanessa Thompson claim her estranged husband had a history of controlling behavior and verbal abuse. Friends say she often appeared fearful in public. The post spread fast. Then came screenshots, fake messages, cropped photos, invented narratives, all painted to make Henry look like a man barely holding himself together. Talk shows picked it up. A radio host sneered. "It's always the quiet ones. You never really know what happens behind closed doors." At work, men who once respected Henry now watched him differently. Their greetings were shorter. Their laughter quieter when he entered the room. He could feel it, that invisible line between known and judged. One morning, a deputy sheriff knocked at his door. "Mr. Fred?" Henry nodded, still half asleep. The deputy handed him an envelope. "You've been served. Temporary restraining order. You can't contact Mrs. Fred directly." Henry stared at the paper. "Restraining order? For what?" The deputy sighed. "Says here, emotional intimidation. Just stay clear until the hearing." Henry's hands trembled slightly as he closed the door. He leaned against it, the words emotional intimidation echoing in his head. He'd never even raised his voice at her in anger. Not once. But now, on paper, in headlines, in whispers, he was a threat. At Jamal's office later that day, Henry dropped the document onto his desk. "She said I scared her." Jamal read the paper silently, jaw tightening. "They're setting up narrative control. It's a tactic, sympathy positioning. They make her look like the victim before trial." Henry rubbed his forehead. "People believe what's loudest. Then we'll make the truth louder," Jamal replied. Henry looked at him with tired eyes. "Without shouting?" Jamal smiled faintly. "Exactly." That afternoon, Jamal dug deeper into financial records. Transactions, wire transfers, tax returns, anything that could expose the Thompsons' web. Hours turned into night. The only light came from the blue glow of his laptop screen and the flicker of a desk lamp that hummed faintly. Then he saw it. A line on an old statement from 2019, nearly 3 years before the lottery win. A transfer of $12,500 from Vanessa Fred to Marcus Thompson. Memo line, investment refund. Another followed. Then another. Over $40,000 total. All undocumented. Jamal leaned back slowly. "What the hell were you two up to, Marcus?" The next morning he drove straight to Henry's job site. Dust rose from the ground as trucks rumbled by. Henry stood at the edge of the lot, hands on his hips, surveying foundation work, his sanctuary in chaos. Jamal approached, holding the file. "You might want to sit down for this." Henry frowned. You found something? Jamal opened the folder. Wire transfers between Vanessa and Marcus. 2019. Repeated and large. This isn't casual family help. This is organized. Henry's eyes narrowed. Before the lottery? Long before. Henry exhaled, slow and disbelieving. So this was never just about money. It's about loyalty. Jamal nodded. Exactly. Marcus wasn't protecting her, he was protecting himself. And if we can show that pattern of shared assets, it shatters her claim of independence. Henry stared at the dusty horizon. They always saw me as less. Now they'll see what less can do. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat in her suite at the Thompson mansion, scrolling through her phone. The lies had taken on a life of their own, stories she hadn't even crafted. Some part of her wanted to correct them. Another part didn't. She'd become the symbol of the strong woman who walked away. A movement almost. But in quiet moments she wondered, walked away from what? Marcus entered, phone in hand. The rumor's working. Public sympathy's almost all yours. She looked up, weary. At what cost? He frowned. Don't go soft now. We're too deep. You play victim until the ink dries on that settlement. Vanessa hesitated. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger, perfectly made up but hollow-eyed. By late evening, Jamal had filed a motion for discovery, requesting full documentation of Vanessa's financial history. He called Henry. Once we get her records, everything changes. Henry's voice was calm but distant. Let's not celebrate yet. Why not? Because truth is slow, and lies sprint like hell. That night, Henry sat outside again. Same porch, same silence, same flickering light. But this time he wasn't broken. He was sharpening. He replayed Vanessa's laugh in his mind, the one from before all this. The warmth of it, the sincerity. And then he remembered the sound of her voice in court, rehearsed and cold. He whispered to himself, if love is war, then I was unarmed. But not anymore. Because now he had evidence. And evidence, unlike love, doesn't lie. The air in Orlando had shifted, that heavy stillness that comes before a storm that no one quite sees coming. Henry felt it even when he couldn't explain it. The glances from co-workers. The sudden friendliness from people who had once ignored him. The questions that sounded more like traps. Something was off. It began with Tanya. Vanessa's old friend, a social butterfly who floated between charity events and book clubs, suddenly appeared at Henry's construction firm one Tuesday afternoon. Henry, she said brightly, stepping into his office with that polished laugh. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd check on you. Henry blinked. He hadn't seen her since the wedding anniversary party 2 years ago. Still he smiled politely. You always end up in the right neighborhoods. She laughed, brushing invisible lint from her blouse. You look well. Holding up okay through all this. He shrugged. One day at a time. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Between us, is it true Vanessa froze the joint accounts because she found out about that side investment you made? Henry stiffened. Side investment? She blinked, feigning surprise. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Forget it. But she didn't leave. She lingered, complimenting his office decor, asking who managed payroll, who handled his books. It wasn't small talk. It was reconnaissance. By the time she left, Henry's instincts were on full alert. That evening he called Jamal. Something's not right. The next day Jamal watched her himself. He saw Tanya arrive in heels too clean for a construction site, a smile too sweet for a casual visit. She brought Henry a cup of coffee, laughing, chatting, glancing around just enough to seem curious, but not enough to look suspicious. When she left, Jamal followed her car discreetly for a few blocks. She turned onto Lake Baldwin Drive, and into the gated Thompson estate. He exhaled. Got you. Back at the office, Jamal laid out a plan. She's not here for conversation, he told Henry. She's bait. They're probing for information. Maybe trying to record you slipping up. Henry shook his head. Tanya? She was at our wedding, man. Exactly, Jamal said. That's why you'll never see it coming. They use familiarity to lower your guard. Henry frowned. So what now? We let her talk, Jamal said. But on our terms. The following week, Tanya returned. Same perfume. Same perfect smile. This time, Henry invited her to sit in on a brief conversation about property settlements. Jamal joined halfway through, acting casual, shuffling papers. We're finalizing some documents, he said with a polite nod. He deliberately mentioned numbers, random, meaningless figures, and vague references to offshore considerations. Tanya's eyes flicked to her phone resting on the table. The screen glowed faintly red, recording. Jamal caught it. Didn't react. He let the meeting go on for 10 more minutes, feeding harmless misinformation. Then he stood, smiling thinly. Always a pleasure, Ms. Rhodes. As soon as she left, Jamal locked the door. He turned to Henry. She's recording you. Henry blinked. You're sure? Jamal nodded. The mic on her phone was live. I saw the waveform reflection in her glasses. Henry exhaled sharply. That's cold. Jamal smiled grimly. Colder's coming. That evening, Jamal used an associate to trace Tanya's communications. Within a day, he confirmed what he'd suspected: frequent calls between Tanya and Marcus Thompson, often within minutes of her leaving Henry's firm. The pattern was clear. She was their eyes, their ears, their leak. But Jamal wasn't done. He decided to flip the game. Late one night, Jamal called an old friend, a tech specialist who owed him a favor. Together, they set up a secure recording channel and a spoof line that could intercept outgoing calls from Tanya's device when near Henry's office Wi-Fi. It took 3 days. Then on the 4th, the trap snapped shut. Tanya called Marcus. Her voice was clear. He's calm, Marcus. Too calm. I think Jamal suspects something. Marcus replied, voice sharp. Just keep checking. We need to know what Jamal's building. The money has to stay clean. Vanessa's panicking. That was the thread Jamal needed. He triangulated the signal, then waited. That night, Marcus called Vanessa. Everything's under control. Tanya's keeping him distracted. Once the accounts are settled, we'll shift the funds through Lillian's trust. No one will trace it. Vanessa hesitated. Are you sure this is safe? Marcus laughed. Safer than keeping it where Henry's lawyer can see it. Click. Jamal ended the recording, heart pounding. The evidence was explosive. Illegal to use in open court, yes, but invaluable in strategy. He called Henry. Henry, he said, voice low, we've got them talking about hiding money. Henry didn't speak for a moment. You're saying they're laundering it? Maybe not yet, Jamal said. But intent is everything. And right now they've just shown theirs. The next morning, Henry stood at his job site again. The sun was rising over the skeleton of a new building, steel beams reaching upward like defiant hands. He watched them, silent, steady. Jamal approached with 2 coffees. You're quiet. Henry nodded. It's strange. I thought catching them would feel like winning. And it doesn't? No, Henry said softly. It feels like watching someone you love dig their own grave. Later that night, Jamal backed up the recording on 3 encrypted drives. One he kept in his office safe. One he mailed to a trusted contact. And one he gave to Henry. Keep this, he said. You may never need it in court. But you'll need it for closure. Henry looked down at the small drive, fingers trembling slightly. For truth. Jamal nodded. For peace. Outside, the Florida night hummed with crickets. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. The dirty war was shifting. The hunters were being hunted now. And the truth, quiet, patient, unstoppable, was finally beginning to stir. The morning of the trial dawned gray over Orlando, a quiet, uncertain light filtering through courthouse windows like hesitation itself. Reporters lined the steps. Cameras flashed. The story had traveled far beyond the city now. The Fred divorce. Love, luck, and 7 million lies. Henry stepped out of Jamal's black sedan in a dark navy suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his shoulders squared. He looked calm, but the kind of calm that came from exhaustion, not peace. Jamal walked beside him, files in hand. Remember, he said softly, don't react. Let them talk. We'll answer with evidence. Henry nodded. You know me, Jamal. I build things. I don't throw stones. Good, Jamal replied. Because today the truth is our structure, not our weapon. Inside courtroom 4B, Judge Lorraine Brooks presided, a sharp-eyed woman with decades of experience and a reputation for cutting through theatrics like glass. The Thompsons sat on one side, elegant and stiff. Clarence's posture screamed control. Evelyn whispered strategy behind her pearls. Marcus sat back, legs crossed, exuding smug confidence. And then there was Vanessa, her beauty muted by tension. She wouldn't meet Henry's eyes. Leonard Harris began first. Smooth, confident, and venom-coated with charm. Your Honor, he said, rising with a smile, this case is not about greed. It's about fairness. It's about a woman, Vanessa Thompson Fred, who was blessed by fortune and is now being preyed upon by a man who simply cannot accept that good fortune sometimes falls unevenly. He turned toward Henry, gesturing slightly. This man seeks to capitalize on his wife's luck. He contributed nothing to the purchase, nothing to the ticket, and now, after years of emotional neglect, believes he's entitled to half. Simply because he shared a roof. Gasps fluttered across the room. Cameras clicked. Henry remained still. His hands folded. His jaw locked in quiet discipline. When it was Jamal's turn, he didn't raise his voice. He stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and faced the judge directly. Your Honor, we intend to show that this marriage was a partnership, in every sense of the word. We will demonstrate, through evidence, that the ticket in question was purchased using joint funds. That it was stored in their shared kitchen cabinet. That both parties discussed what to do with the money together, before greed and perhaps pressure tore them apart. He paused. We are not here to take from Mrs. Fred. We are here to remind her, and this court, that shared dreams come with shared reward. Then the evidence began. Bank records. Transaction timestamps. The cashier from the Circle K testified, a nervous woman in her 30s clutching her purse. Yes, ma'am, she told the judge. Mrs. Fred bought the ticket right after paying for groceries. Used a card with both names on it. I remember, 'cause she joked her husband didn't believe in luck. Jamal nodded politely. And that card, would it surprise you to know it came from a joint account ending in 4512? She shook her head. No, sir. That's the one she swiped. Leonard shifted in his seat. Then came Vanessa's turn to testify. She took the stand with poise at first, a pearl bracelet glittering under the lights. But when Jamal approached with his calm precision, her armor began to crack. Mrs. Fred, he began gently, when you bought that ticket, where did the funds come from? Our household account, she said carefully. And who contributed to that account? My husband and I both did. So you're acknowledging that the money used to purchase the ticket was jointly held? She hesitated. Yes, but I was the one who purchased it. Jamal nodded, his voice even. And after winning, you and your husband celebrated together? We did. Discussed plans together? Yes. Opened the ticket together? Her voice softened. Yes. The courtroom murmured. Leonard leapt up. Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness. Judge Brooks raised an eyebrow. Overruled. She's answering voluntarily. Jamal stepped closer, lowering his tone. Mrs. Fred, would you say that, at least in spirit, this lottery win was shared? Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her bracelet. Finally she whispered, at the time, yes. Clarence's jaw tightened. Marcus exhaled sharply, glaring at her like she'd just betrayed their bloodline. Henry didn't move. He couldn't. He just stared down at his hands, steady, unmoving. The man who had once built a home, now rebuilding his dignity brick by brick. Then came Clarence's turn. The patriarch took the stand with arrogance that filled the room. I've always looked after my daughter, he declared. I advised her to protect her assets. A man of my position would never allow his family's wealth to. Mr. Thompson, Jamal interrupted smoothly, were you aware your daughter's lottery ticket was purchased using marital funds? Clarence frowned. That's irrelevant. Jamal smiled faintly. To this court it's not. Clarence's composure cracked. His tone sharpened. You don't understand how we operate. That money was a blessing for our family, not for outsiders. The words hung heavy. Henry looked up, meeting his father-in-law's eyes across the courtroom. Neither man blinked. For the first time, Judge Brooks looked intrigued. By the end of the first day, the Thompsons' confidence had faltered. Vanessa's testimony had softened their case. Clarence's arrogance had hardened the judge's demeanor. And Henry, though silent, had won something deeper than a legal edge. He had reclaimed his voice without speaking a word. As the gavel struck for recess, Jamal leaned toward him. She's starting to see you again, not as the man she painted, but as the man she left. Henry didn't respond. His eyes remained on the floor, where reflections of flashbulbs danced like restless ghosts. Outside, reporters shouted questions. Henry kept walking, the Florida sun harsh but strangely cleansing. He had built houses his whole life. Now he was building his name, from the ashes of love and lies. When truth meets pride in the same room, someone always breaks first. If you've ever watched a lie collapse under its own weight, you know the power of patience. Tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Have you ever been in a situation where silence said more than words ever could? Drop your thoughts below. Someone out there needs to hear how you survived your own courtroom. January 12, 2024. The world seemed to hold its breath that morning. Even the air inside courtroom 4B felt heavier, as if it knew that whatever would be spoken next could not be taken back. Reporters waited outside. Flashbulbs painted the hallway in anxious white bursts. Inside, the audience sat stiff and wordless, their anticipation louder than any whisper could ever be. Judge Lorraine Brooks entered precisely at 9 a.m., her robe pressed, her eyes unflinching. No introductions. No delays. Just authority wrapped in silence. She took her seat and looked down at both tables. To her right, Vanessa Thompson Fred, her face pale, her lips trembling slightly though she tried to keep still. Beside her, Leonard Harris adjusted his tie with the precision of a man trying to mask defeat. Behind them, Clarence and Evelyn sat like stone, hands folded tight. Marcus wasn't there, perhaps unwilling to witness the collapse of his family's last illusion of control. To her left, Henry Fred. So, steady. Composed. Jamal whispered something in his ear, but Henry didn't reply. He didn't need to. His silence was already a statement, the final chapter of a pain he had outgrown. Judge Brooks lifted a thin folder from her bench. Her voice, calm and deliberate, cut through the air. This court has reviewed the evidence, testimony, and financial records presented during these proceedings. We find that while the prenuptial agreement signed between Mr. and Mrs. Fred remains valid, the lottery ticket in question was purchased using joint marital funds. Therefore, it constitutes marital property. Pause. A collective inhale. Mr. Henry Fred is entitled to 50% of the winnings, an amount totaling $3,500,000. Silence. Not the kind of silence born of peace, but the kind that comes after a gunshot, when the echo still hangs in the air and no one knows if it's truly over. Vanessa's breath caught. Her hand went to her chest instinctively, as though trying to slow the pounding within. Her eyes darted to Henry, searching for something, perhaps anger, perhaps softness. But he didn't look back. Clarence's fists clenched on the table. His jaw worked furiously as if chewing the taste of defeat itself. Evelyn placed a trembling hand on his arm, but he pulled it away. Leonard Harris exhaled sharply, muttering under his breath, "We'll appeal." But even he didn't sound convinced. Judge Brooks closed her folder. This court reminds both parties that the true cost of victory is often peace. Let today mark not just the end of litigation, but the beginning of release. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. Henry stood slowly. He didn't smile. Didn't gloat. He just gathered his papers, adjusted his tie, and nodded to Jamal. Vanessa turned in her chair. "Henry." He paused for half a second, his back still to her. Her voice trembled. "I never meant for it to end like this." He looked over his shoulder, only slightly, his expression unreadable. Then softly, almost inaudibly, "You just didn't think it ever would." And with that he walked out. The hallway outside exploded with flashes and questions. Microphones surged toward him like weapons. "Mr. Fred, how do you feel? Do you plan to reconcile? Will you keep the house?" Jamal guided him forward, blocking cameras with his arm. Henry said nothing. He stepped through the courthouse doors into the crisp January sunlight. It was brighter than he remembered. The kind of light that exposes everything, but also cleanses. He exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cool air. For the first time in months, his chest felt open. Inside, Vanessa sat frozen. The reporters had turned their lenses elsewhere, but her mind stayed locked on the sight of him walking away. Her father hissed beside her, "You've humiliated us." She didn't answer. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of Clarence Thompson's voice. She was afraid of silence, the kind that fills a house when love has packed its bags and left without a sound. She looked down at her hands. No jewelry now. No victory. Just shaking fingers and a verdict she couldn't unhear. Later, Henry and Jamal sat outside on a courthouse bench, away from the crowd. Jamal handed him a bottle of water. "You okay?" Henry took it, twisting the cap. "I thought I'd feel something different." "Like what?" "I don't know. Justice. Relief. Maybe even anger." He shook his head. "But it just feels quiet." Jamal smiled faintly. "That's what peace sounds like. You just forgot how to hear it." Henry nodded slowly. He looked up at the sky, pale blue streaked with winter sun. And for the first time in a long while he smiled. Not big. Not performative. Just honest. By evening the headlines screamed. Court awards $3.50 million to Henry Fred. Love and money collide. But Henry didn't read them. He didn't need validation anymore. He had already won the one thing the court couldn't give him, clarity. He knew now that peace wasn't found in verdicts or numbers. It was found in knowing when to walk away without bitterness, and still wish the other person healing. As the sun dipped beyond the courthouse steps, Henry slipped his hands into his pockets and started walking, one step at a time, toward a life rebuilt, toward a freedom quietly earned. The morning after the verdict, Orlando woke to chaos. By dawn, every local news outlet had Henry Fred's name plastered across screens. The headlines painted him as the everyman who stood tall against privilege. Blue-collar builder beats the millionaire family. Talk shows replayed clips of him leaving the courthouse, his silence interpreted as strength, his calm mistaken for heroism. On social media, opinions split like fault lines. Some praised him, he deserved it. She tried to play him. Others scorned, he only got lucky through her. She earned it. But Henry didn't read any of it. He spent the morning on his porch, coffee in hand, staring at the stillness of his neighborhood, the calm after a long, brutal storm. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He was just quiet. Peace wasn't loud. It never was. Across town in the Thompson mansion, silence felt heavier, thick enough to drown in. Vanessa sat at the long dining table, the same place where her father once praised her for marrying sensibly. Now Clarence Thompson couldn't even look at her. He paced the marble floor in his robe, fury pulsing with every step. You had one job, he spat. To protect what's yours. Instead, you humiliated this family in front of the entire city. Vanessa's voice cracked. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Don't speak. He slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the empty house. You married beneath you, and now you've dragged our name down with you. Marcus stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching the collapse with cold detachment. She lost her edge, he said bitterly. You give a man like Henry too much credit, and he'll start thinking he's your equal. Vanessa turned toward him, eyes glistening. Marcus, please? But Marcus only sneered. You let him win. You let him beat us. Clarence glared at her one final time. As of today, you're cut off from the family business. No more stipends. No more loans. You'll learn what it's like to live without the Thompson name saving you. You walked out. Marcus followed. The sound of their footsteps faded, leaving Vanessa sitting alone in the grand, echoing room, the chandelier's reflection trembling in the tears she could no longer hold back. Days turned into weeks. Henry returned to his construction work, though now reporters often loitered near the gates of his sites, hoping for a quote. He'd smile politely, shake his head, and move on. He refused to become anyone's story. He was done being explained. Jamal dropped by his home one evening with takeout and paperwork for the transfer of funds. Henry poured 2 glasses of bourbon and raised his. To the slow and fair, he said, echoing Jamal's words from months ago. Jamal chuckled. You know, most men in your shoes would have gone to Vegas by now. Henry smirked faintly. I think I already gambled enough. He leaned back. Now I just want to build something that lasts. What are you going to do with the money? Jamal asked. Henry's eyes drifted toward the window, where the setting sun painted the city gold. Something good. Something that gives dignity back to men like me who get written off until it's too late. Jamal nodded. Then you've already won more than they'll ever understand. Back in the Thompson mansion, Evelyn lay bedridden. Stress had aged her overnight. Her once polished composure cracked into frail murmurs of confusion and shame. People are talking, she whispered to Lillian. They say our name means nothing now. Lillian sat beside her, stroking her hand with faux sympathy. Oh, Evelyn, people talk today and forget tomorrow, she said softly. What matters is that family stays together. But behind that gentle voice hid something venomous. For weeks, Lillian had been quietly transferring funds from Vanessa's trust account, little by little, masked behind her financial assistance. Each transaction signed with Vanessa's digital authorization, the one Lillian had coaxed her into sharing during her grief. It wasn't greed alone that drove her, it was old resentment. For years, Lillian had been the family's shadow, tolerated but never respected. Now, the Thompsons were collapsing, and she was determined to walk away with more than sympathy. Vanessa barely left her room. The mirrors were covered, her phone switched off. Once, she had been the woman who commanded attention in every room. Now she couldn't stand to see her own reflection. She played the court recording again on her laptop, Judge Brooks's voice calm and final. Mr. Henry Fred is entitled to 50% of the winnings. Each replay hurt worse. Each replay stripped away another layer of denial. Outside her window, the garden her mother once tended was overgrown. A metaphor too obvious to ignore. Aunt Lillian knocked lightly before entering, carrying tea. You need to rest, dear. You've been through a lot. Vanessa's voice was hollow. They've all turned their backs. Lillian set the cup down gently. Let them. You don't need them right now. You just need to heal. But as she spoke, her eyes flicked toward Vanessa's desk, where a folder of financial statements lay open. Numbers. Account balances. Signatures. A quiet smile ghosted across Lillian's lips before she turned back to her niece. Meanwhile, Henry visited his father's old porch in Jacksonville, the same one where he once broke down months ago. This time he brought blueprints, not heartbreak. He ran his fingers across the paper, plans for a small but solid construction firm. A company built not on inheritance, not on luck, but on honesty. He named it Fredline Construction. For him, it wasn't just about buildings. It was about rebuilding himself, brick by brick, value by value. As dusk fell, he sat there listening to the soft hum of crickets, the sound of life still moving. And for the first time in a long while, Henry whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, God, for the breaking and for the rebuilding." Far away, Vanessa sat in her darkened room, unaware that her aunt's betrayal had already begun, that another storm, colder and quieter, was slowly forming behind her back. The war was over, but the wounds were far from healed. It began quietly. No press conference. No victory tour. No fanfare. Just Henry Fred, in jeans, steel-toed boots and a sun-faded cap, walking across a half-abandoned construction yard in the west side of Orlando. The company was called Delta Site Works, a once-thriving local contractor now buried under debt and bad leadership. The men there worked without pride, clocking in because they had to, not because they wanted to. Henry saw it for what it was, a broken foundation with good bones. He bought it outright, renamed it Fred and Carter Developments in honor of the man who had fought beside him when the world laughed. It wasn't just a company. It was a declaration that hard work still had value, that decency could still build something lasting. The first few weeks were chaos. Old machines sputtered like tired lungs. The books were a mess. Half the workers expected layoffs. But Henry wasn't there to cut corners. He was there to build trust. He gathered the crew one morning, standing on a stack of plywood with sawdust catching the sunrise. "Most of you don't know me," he began, his voice steady, unpolished. "And maybe you've stopped believing in bosses who keep their word. I get that." He paused, eyes scanning faces, weary, skeptical, hungry for hope. "But I didn't buy this company to get rich. I bought it because too many good men get tossed aside when they still got more to give. So if you're willing to work honest, you've got a place here. No games, no lies. Just work that matters." No one clapped. But one by one, the heads began to nod. By month's end, the difference was visible. Henry rehired 2 foremen who'd been laid off unjustly. He promoted a single father from night janitor to site supervisor. He brought in ex-convicts who'd served their time but couldn't find work elsewhere. He gave them tools, uniforms, and something rarer, respect. Wages were raised. Safety standards enforced. Laughter returned to the break room where silence once lived. Henry spent his days on site working alongside his crew, hammer in hand, dirt on his shirt, humility in his posture. Jamal Carter, now his partner, handled the paperwork and expansion plans. But Henry was the soul of the operation. One afternoon, Jamal watched him share lunch under a scaffold with 3 workers, 2 ex-offenders and a retired roofer. "You know, you could just eat in your office," Jamal said. Henry grinned. "This is my office." Across town, the world looked different. Vanessa Thompson Fred, once the center of elegant brunches and charity galas, now worked behind a small desk at her father's company. No more private office. No assistant. No respect. Her co-workers whispered when she passed. She heard every word, "That's the one who lost 7 million. She wore her humiliation like an invisible bruise. Each morning she painted on confidence, lipstick, pressed blazer, faint perfume, but by noon the mask cracked. She avoided eye contact with her father. Clarence rarely spoke to her now, except through curt memos or company-wide announcements. Still she worked. Quietly. Efficiently. Gratefully. Some part of her understood she needed this. The fall, the silence, the chance to learn what life looked like without the safety net of family wealth. At night, she drove home to a small apartment in Winter Park. Nothing like the mansion she'd grown up in, but warm in its simplicity. No servants. No noise. Just her thoughts. She'd scroll through the news on her phone sometimes, stories about Fred and Carter Developments. Former construction manager builds second chance empire. Ex-husband of lottery queen hires forgotten men. Each headline hit her chest like a stone, not because of jealousy but because of recognition. Henry was doing exactly what she once admired in him, turning pain into purpose. She closed her phone and whispered to the dark. He always knew how to build things, even when I only knew how to buy them. Meanwhile, Fred and Carter developments grew. By spring they secured 2 major city contracts, small projects at first but steady. Henry walked through each site personally, shaking hands, listening more than he spoke. He was still quiet, still humble, but something in him had shifted. He no longer carried the weight of needing to prove himself to anyone. He just worked and let the work speak. One afternoon, a local reporter stopped by for an interview. Henry refused the camera but agreed to talk. "What made you choose to hire people others overlook?" she asked. He wiped sweat from his brow and smiled faintly. "Because I know what it's like to be overlooked. Everyone deserves one more chance to get it right." The line made the evening news, replayed across Florida, turning him into a symbol of quiet redemption. But not all stories stay clean. Behind the scenes, a financial discrepancy was brewing. Small transfers from one of the Thompson trusts, the same one connected to Vanessa's accounts. Someone was stealing, and slowly the threads were beginning to point toward Aunt Lillian. Henry didn't know it yet. Vanessa didn't either. But fate, in its patient cruelty, was preparing to pull their lives back into the same orbit once again. That night, Henry sat on his office balcony overlooking the site. The city lights shimmered like forgiveness. He opened a notebook, one page filled with ideas for an employee housing project. At the top, he wrote, "Everyone deserves a roof, and redemption." He leaned back, took a deep breath and smiled. He had built something no court could award, peace earned through purpose. It began with a letter. A single white envelope, plain, unmarked, slipped into Vanessa's office mailbox on a Thursday morning. Inside, a bank statement, her trust account showing withdrawals she hadn't made. Large ones. Repeated. Each transaction signed under her own authorization. At first she thought it was a mistake. Then the name appeared at the bottom of an attached transfer notice. L. Thompson. Lillian. Her chest tightened. Her hands shook. She reread the numbers until the paper blurred. Thousands, then hundreds of thousands, siphoned away quietly over months. Her aunt, her comfort, her only ally in the chaos, had robbed her blind. That evening, Vanessa drove straight to Lillian's townhouse in Baldwin Park. The door was unlocked. The lights glowed warm. And there she was, sipping wine, humming softly to an old Motown tune, as if guilt had no home there. Vanessa's voice trembled. "You stole from me." Lillian didn't even flinch. She set the glass down, exhaled, and said, "You'll understand one day, sweetheart. Family takes care of family, and I took care of myself before they took everything from me." Vanessa stepped closer. "You were all I had left, Lillian." Lillian's eyes hardened. "And you were careless. You left the keys in the door and acted shocked when someone walked in. That's life, Vanessa, not betrayal." The words landed like slaps. Vanessa's tears came hot, fast, and furious. "You sound just like them." "Maybe," Lillian said coldly, "but at least I never pretended to be better." Vanessa turned and walked out, silent, shaking, leaving behind the aunt she'd once trusted more than her own mother. By the weekend the news broke. A quiet investigation revealed Lillian's theft, more than $600,000 misappropriated from family trusts and Vanessa's personal account. Marcus was dragged into it too. His gambling debts and unpaid loans tied him to the same transactions. Clarence tried to suppress it, but the story leaked fast, spreading like a stain that refused to fade. The Thompsons' empire, polished, proud, and poisonous, crumbled under its own weight. Clarence Thompson suffered a mild stroke 2 days later. Evelyn, fragile and remorseful, sat by his hospital bed, eyes swollen, fingers trembling over his still hand. When Vanessa arrived, her mother didn't look up. "I knew," Evelyn whispered. "About Lillian. About Marcus. About the money." Vanessa's throat tightened. "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because," Evelyn said, her voice barely audible, "your father wouldn't have survived another scandal. And I thought, maybe lies could keep us whole." Vanessa shook her head, tears falling freely. "Lies don't keep us whole, Mama. They just rot the parts that used to be good." For the first time, Evelyn reached for her daughter's hand. "Then promise me," she said weakly, "you'll find a way out of this mess, away from us." Vanessa squeezed her hand. "I already have, Mama. I just don't know if he'll ever forgive me." That night, she drove across town, past neon diners, past the courthouse where everything had ended, until she reached the west side of Orlando. A large sign glowed under floodlights. Fred and Carter Developments. She parked across the street, engine idling. Through the chain-link fence she saw him. Henry. He stood in a hard hat and reflective vest, sleeves rolled up, talking to a young worker, a thin teenager with trembling hands. The boy looked nervous, apologizing over a spilled bucket of paint. Henry smiled, placed a hand on his shoulder and said something that made the boy laugh. Vanessa couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. She remembered that tone, that patience, that quiet strength. The same man who once taught her that love wasn't always fireworks. Sometimes it was the steady sound of someone refusing to give up on you. She sat there for a long time watching him. The world had torn them apart, and yet somehow he had built something sacred from the wreckage. The porch light of his new life burned steady. Inside the site office, Jamal appeared with blueprints and a knowing grin. "She's still out there," he murmured softly. Henry didn't look up from his papers. "Who?" "Vanessa." Henry froze for a moment, just long enough for the truth to settle. Then he sighed quietly, setting the papers down. "She's been standing by the gate for 15 minutes, Jamal continued. "You going to talk to her?" Henry shook his head. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because sometimes," he said, glancing toward the window, "people have to walk away twice, once to hurt you and once to heal themselves." Jamal nodded slowly. "And you?" Henry smiled faintly. "I already healed." Outside, Vanessa stood under the soft hum of the streetlight, tears glinting in her eyes. She whispered, "I'm proud of you, Henry." Then she turned, got in her car, and drove away before he ever looked up. The following morning, the news spread through Orlando's business circles. The Thompson family, once a pillar of prestige, faces legal scrutiny after internal embezzlement scandal. Clarence Thompson hospitalized, family holdings under audit. But in another part of the city, where cranes cut into blue sky and the sound of drills hummed like hope, a different name was rising, quietly, steadily. Fred and Carter Developments had become a symbol of what real rebuilding looked like. Not just structures of steel and brick, but of men, hearts, and integrity. By sunset, Henry walked across the site alone. He paused by the fence, the same spot where Vanessa had stood hours earlier, and looked out at the empty road. For a brief second he felt it, the ghost of what once was. Not bitterness. Just memory. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Be well, Vanessa." Then he turned back toward the sound of hammers, toward life, toward work, toward peace. Months later. The city has changed, or maybe it's just that Henry finally sees it differently. Skyscrapers rise where empty lots once stood. Sidewalks bustle with vendors and laughter. The echoes of new beginnings hum through the air. Henry steps out of a modest black SUV, his polished shoes meeting the red carpet rolled across the entrance of the Orlando Civic Hall. The banner above reads, "Honoring the Builders of Tomorrow, a celebration of Black enterprise." Inside, warm lights shimmer across the crowd. Entrepreneurs, mentors, and young dreamers fill the room, people who once thought opportunity lived on the other side of the tracks. Henry moves quietly through them, nodding, shaking hands, accepting congratulations he never chased. Jamal is beside him, eyes gleaming with pride. "You nervous?" Jamal teases. Henry chuckles softly. "A little. But I've faced worse than applause." When his name is called, Henry steps onto the stage. The applause swells, steady and genuine, not for the millions, not for the court victory, but for the man who built something true. He adjusts the microphone, gaze sweeping across the room. "I used to think building was just about walls and roofs," he begins. "But over time I learned that what we build between each other, trust, forgiveness, second chances, that's what lasts." The crowd listens closely. "My company started with 12 men. Some had criminal records. Some had broken families. Most had been told they weren't worth a paycheck. But I saw myself in them, people who'd been counted out too soon. And I made a promise, that no man willing to work hard should ever feel forgotten." Jamal wipes at his eyes discreetly. A few people stand, clapping before he even finishes. Henry smiles humbly. "So tonight isn't about success. It's about gratitude. To every person who fell, and decided to stand again. You're the real builders of tomorrow." The audience rises, applauding in full. Cameras flash. Henry bows his head slightly, overwhelmed, not by pride but by peace. Across town, a woman sits in quiet shadow. Vanessa. Her condo is dimly lit, the TV glowing softly against her face. On the screen, Henry stands under golden light, speaking with the grace she used to take for granted. His voice carries through the room, building things that last. Vanessa swirls her wine slowly, her reflection shimmering beside his on the glass surface. Her lips tremble into a bittersweet smile. "You always built better than we did," she whispers. Her eyes glisten not with regret, but recognition. She sets the glass down, walks to the window and watches the night sky, full of stars she hasn't noticed in months. Later that night Henry drives home. The city quiets behind him, traffic thinning, lights softening into streaks along the windshield. He takes a turn instinctively, one he hasn't taken in years. College Park. The neighborhood feels smaller now. The trees seem shorter, the air still familiar. He slows as he nears the old house, the one they once dreamed in, fought in, loved in. It stands silent. The paint has faded, the porch railing slightly crooked. But as his headlights brush the front steps, the porch light flickers. A faint hum, then glow. Henry stops the car. He watches the light pulse, once, twice, steady now as if greeting him. He laughs quietly to himself, that gentle, almost private laugh of a man who's finally made peace with the past. "Still working," he murmurs. "Still standing." He rolls down the window, lets the night air fill the car, then drives on, slow, peaceful, into the waiting dark. Behind him the porch light stays on. We've all built something, a dream, a family, a name, and sometimes we've watched it fall apart. But what matters is what we build after the fall. Tell me, what would you rebuild if you had the chance? Share your thoughts below. Maybe your story helps someone else find the courage to start again.